seeds of chance. The rain pelted against the glass roof of the conservatory with such force that Thea Winters could barely hear herself think. She preferred it that way. At 36, the renowned botanist had cultivated not only one of the world's most impressive collections of endangered plants, but also a formidable reputation for preferring their company to that of humans. "You being stubborn again," she murmured to the Rothschild's slipper orchid that refused to bloom. Her slender fingers, stained with soil, gently stroked its waxy leaves. The plant, worth more than some small cars, was one of only 11 known specimens left in the world. Thea had devoted 3 years to coaxing it toward flowering. The Billionaire Botanical Sanctuary sprawled across 15 acres of Thea's inherited estate in the English countryside. Unlike other private collections, it wasn't designed to impress visitors. There were none. It existed solely for research and preservation, funded by Thea's family fortune and occasional research grants. The exclusive sanctuary employed only 4 staff members, all of whom knew to maintain their distance from the owner. The sudden crash of breaking glass shattered both the silence and Thea's concentration. She spun around, nearly knocking over the orchid, and rushed toward the sound in the east wing. "What happened?" she demanded, entering the damaged greenhouse to find her head gardener, Mrs. Blackwood, standing over a soaked man who was frantically trying to gather shards of glass. "I'm so sorry, madam," the man said in accented English, his eyes downcast. "The wind had pushed the ladder. I couldn't hold it." Thea assessed the situation clinically. A broken pane, some damaged climbing vines, but nothing irreplaceable. The man, however, was bleeding from a cut on his forearm. "Who is this?" she asked Mrs. Blackwood. "Omar Kazemi, the new groundskeeper. Started yesterday." References from the Q temporary program. Omar stood, still apologizing, water dripping from his dark hair. Thea noticed his hands. They weren't the rough hands of someone who'd spent a lifetime in manual labor. They were an artist's hands, with long fingers and careful movements, even as they trembled slightly now. "The glass can wait. You need medical attention," Thea said, surprising herself with the concern in her voice. "Mrs. Blackwood, please show Mr. Kazemi to the medical cabinet." Later that evening, unable to sleep, Thea found herself drawn back to the east wing. The rain had finally stopped, and moonlight streamed through the repaired glass panel. She'd come to check on the damaged Persian lime tree, but stopped short when she spotted a figure sitting on the stone bench beside it. Omar hadn't noticed her. He was sketching in a small worn notebook, completely absorbed. Thea remained still, watching as his pencil moved with remarkable precision. From her angle, she could see he wasn't just drawing the lime tree. He was creating a detailed botanical illustration, complete with anatomical notations in what appeared to be Farsi. "You're not just a groundskeeper, are you?" she asked, stepping forward. Dotmar jumped, closing the notebook instantly. "Ms. Winters, I apologize for being here after hours. I was making notes for tomorrow's repairs." "Those weren't repair notes," she said, extending her hand. "May I?" Reluctantly, he handed over the notebook. Thea turned the pages with increasing amazement. Each drawing was museum-quality detailed illustrations of various plants from her collection, with precise scientific observations noted alongside. "You're a botanist," she stated. Omar's shoulders tensed. "I was in another life." Thea sat beside him, keeping a respectful distance. "Damascus University, Tehran." "Aleppo," he replied quietly. "I was a professor of botany, specializing in drought-resistant species. Then the war came." The weight of unspoken history hung between them. Thea had read about Syrian academics displaced by conflict, their credentials often meaningless in their new countries. "And now you mend broken glass in my greenhouses." "I'm grateful for the work," Omar said with dignity. "Many have it worse." Thea studied him for a moment, then made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives. "The Persian lime you were drawing, it's suffering from nutrient deficiency. The soil composition is wrong." "Yes," Omar replied carefully. "I noticed the yellowing pattern on the leaves suggests magnesium deficiency. In Aleppo, we would add dolomite lime to the soil." "We have some in the east storage room," Thea said. "Tomorrow, I'd like you to treat it. And then, if you're willing, I could use a consultation on the subtropical section. Some of the specimens there are showing signs of stress I haven't been able to diagnose." Omar looked up, meeting her eyes directly for the first time. "Do you want my professional opinion?" "I want the best care for my plants," Thea replied. "It seems I've been underutilizing the expertise available to me." As she walked away, Thea felt oddly unsettled. She had carefully constructed her isolated world, keeping people at arm's length while she devoted herself to preserving endangered botanical species. Yet something about Omar's presence, his hidden knowledge, his careful documentation of her precious plants, the dignity with which he carried his diminished circumstances had punctured her carefully maintained solitude. Neither of them could have predicted that the broken greenhouse pane would become the first crack in the walls Thea had built around herself, or that Omar's secret sketches would grow into something that would eventually change the botanical world forever. Roots of Trust. 3 months after the broken greenhouse pane incident, Thea stood in the center of the subtropical conservatory, watching Omar as he carefully examined the underside of a salon ebony leaf. What had begun as a one-time consultation had evolved into an unofficial promotion. though still officially a groundskeeper on paper. Omar now spent half his days working directly with Thea on the more scientific aspects of the sanctuary. "The fungal treatment is working," Omar announced, his voice carrying the quiet confidence that Thea had come to respect. "The new growth shows no signs of infection." Thea nodded, feeling relief wash over her. The mysterious blight that had threatened to devastate her collection of Sri Lankan rarities had been identified by Omar within days. A fungal pathogen previously undocumented in cultivated specimens. His solution, a traditional remedy using a paste made from crushed neem seeds mixed with a modern fungicide, that had halted the spread when conventional treatments had failed. "We should document this," Thea said, making notes in her tablet. "It could help other collections if they encounter the same pathogen." Omar hesitated. "Will you be publishing the findings?" The question hung in the air between them. They both knew the implications. Any academic publication would require proper attribution, which would mean revealing Omar's presence and expertise at Windermere. "Yes," Thea replied finally, "under both our names." Omar's expression remained carefully neutral, but Thea caught the slight straightening of his posture. "That's not necessary. I'm just doing my job." "Your job title is groundskeeper, Omar. What you've done here is botanical pathology at the highest level." Thea set down her tablet. "I don't take credit for others' work." Before Omar could respond, Mrs. Blackwood appeared at the conservatory entrance. "Ms. Winters, there's a gentleman here to see you, a Mr. Harrison from Botanical Heritage Press." Thea frowned. "I don't have any appointments today. He says it's regarding illustrations for the rare species catalog you contributed to last year. Something about the artist falling ill and deadlines." Thea's mind raced. The Endangered Botanical Heritage Project was the most prestigious publication in their field, a limited edition catalog documenting the world's rarest plants with scientific accuracy and artistic beauty. She had contributed specimens and research, but the illustration component was handled separately. "Tell him I'll be there in 10 minutes, Thea said. As Mrs. Blackwood left, she turned to Omar. "I need to handle this. Could you finish the humidity adjustments for the Nepenthes section?" Omar nodded and Thea hurried to her office, where she found Jonathan Harrison, the publishing director, pacing anxiously beside her desk. His usual dapper appearance was marred by visible stress. "Thea, thank goodness," he said, foregoing formalities. "We're in crisis mode. Edmund Vaughan suffered a stroke last week. He completed only 40% of the illustrations, and we go to press in 2 months. Edmund Vaughan was the Botanical Artist Laureate, famous for his meticulous hand-drawn illustrations. His work was the centerpiece of the publication." "I'm sorry to hear about Edmund," Thea said sincerely, "but I don't see how I can help. You need an illustrator, not a botanist." Jonathan ran a hand through his thinning hair. "We need someone who understands the plants scientifically and can render them artistically. There's no one else who can match Edmund's level in the time frame we have." He dropped heavily into a chair. "We're considering digital alternatives, but it won't be the same. The whole project might be delayed a year." Thea's mind flashed to Omar's notebook, filled with illustrations that rivaled any she'd seen in publication. "What if I told you I might know someone?" Jonathan looked up sharply. "Let me show you something first." Thea left the room briefly and returned with Omar's notebook, which he had allowed her to keep for reference. She opened it to a detailed drawing of the Rothschild's slipper orchid, complete with cross-sections and developmental stages. Jonathan stared in disbelief, then carefully turned the pages. "These are ... extraordinary. Who did these?" "Someone who works here," Thea said cautiously. "A botanist with formal training. They're better than Edmund's early work." Jonathan marveled. The scientific accuracy, combined with the artistic sensibility. "Why haven't I heard of this person?" Thea took a deep breath. "It's complicated. He's Syrian, a refugee. His academic credentials aren't recognized here." Jonathan looked up, understanding dawning on his face. "I'd need to discuss it with him first," Thea said firmly. "He's very private about his background." "Of course," Jonathan replied, carefully closing the notebook. "But Thea, if he can produce work like this for the catalog, I can offer a very generous commission, and the exposure could be ... life-changing." After Jonathan left with tentative plans to return the following week, Thea found Omar in the propagation room, carefully dividing rare orchid seedlings. "I showed your illustrations to someone today," she said without preamble. Omar's hand stilled. "Without asking me first." The hurt in his voice made Thea realize her mistake. "I'm sorry, I should have consulted you." She sat on a stool across from him. It was Jonathan Harrison from Botanical Heritage Press. "Their lead illustrator is ill, and they need someone for their endangered species catalog." Omar remained silent, his focus seemingly on the delicate seedlings before him. "He thought your work was extraordinary," Thea continued. "Better than their previous artist." "And what did you tell him about me?" Omar finally asked, his voice carefully controlled. "The truth. That you're a botanist, that you're Syrian." Thea met his gaze directly. "That your credentials aren't recognized here, but your expertise is undeniable." Omar's expression softened slightly. "And what did he say to that?" "He wants to meet you next week. The commission would be substantial." Thea paused. "It could be an opportunity." "Omar, an opportunity," he echoed. or an exposure. Thea understood his caution. In the months they had worked together, Omar had shared fragments of his journey, the university position lost to war, the dangerous journey across borders, the humiliation of watching his academic career dissolve into meaningless paper credentials. I believe it's an opportunity, Thea said quietly. But it's your choice entirely. I've already overstepped by showing your work without permission. Omar carefully placed the last seedling in its growing medium before responding. In my country, I published 3 books on botanical species of the Middle East. My illustrations were exhibited in Damascus. His voice carried no pride, only fact. Now I am invisible except when I am useful. You're not invisible to me, Thea said, surprising herself with the emotion in her voice. Something shifted in Omar's expression. No, he agreed softly, not to you. That evening, after most staff had departed, Thea found Omar sitting on a bench in the Mediterranean garden, sketching the ancient olive tree that scented the space. Without speaking, she sat beside him, closer than their usual careful distance. I'll meet with your publisher, Omar said finally. But I have conditions. Name them. I use a pseudonym. Nothing that connects to my past or present situation. His pencil moved delicately across the paper. And I want you to co-author the botanical descriptions. Your reputation will lend credibility. Thea considered this. I'll agree to the co-authorship only if you allow your real name on at least the copyright page, not visible to casual readers, but documented officially. Omar's pencil paused. Why is that important to you? Because someday the world might be ready to acknowledge who you really are, Thea replied. And when that day comes, there should be a record. Omar studied her face for a long moment, then nodded once. Agreed. As they sat in companionable silence watching the setting sun filter through the ancient olive's gnarled branches, Thea realized something had fundamentally changed. The careful professional boundaries she had established were blurring. Omar was no longer simply a colleague with valuable expertise. He had become someone whose dignity mattered to her personally, whose past she honored, whose future she found herself invested in. And that realization was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. Thorns of Society. 6 months after Omar began illustrating for Botanical Heritage Press, the Endangered Species Catalog was released to unprecedented acclaim. Art critics praised the mysterious OK Winters for illustrations that combined scientific precision with artistic soul. Botanical academics marveled at the detailed observations accompanying each illustration, co-authored by Thea Winters and the unknown artist. At Windermere, subtle changes transformed the sanctuary. Omar now occupied a converted sunroom as his studio, its walls adorned with preliminary sketches and botanical studies. Thea had officially hired him as botanical research associate, though Mrs. Blackwood and the other staff exchanged knowing glances at the evolving relationship between employer and employee. The Royal Botanical Society wants to nominate the catalog for the Linnaeus Medal, Thea announced one morning, entering Omar's studio without an keen familiarity that had developed between them. Omar looked up from his drawing table. That's your achievement, not mine. It's ours, Thea insisted. And I've recommended you as the primary recipient. Omar set down his pencil. You can't do that. I already have. Thea's voice was firm. The committee meets next week. Omar stood, tension evident in every line of his body. If they investigate me, let them, Thea interrupted. You deserve recognition. That evening, Thea attended a fundraising gala for botanical conservation. Professor Donnelly, chairman of the Linnaeus Committee, cornered her by the champagne fountain. Your nomination has caused quite a stir, Thea, he said, swirling his drink. An unknown illustrator with no academic record. Some committee members find it ... suspicious. His work speaks for itself, Thea replied coolly. Indeed. Some wonder if perhaps you created these illustrations yourself. Donnelly's smile didn't reach his eyes. Others suggest this mysterious OK Winters might be someone with a complicated past you're sheltering. Is there a question in there, Professor? Only this: the Linnaeus Medal has never been awarded to someone without verifiable credentials. The committee would need to interview this illustrator personally. He leaned closer. Unless you withdraw the nomination. Thea's response was interrupted by her phone buzzing with an urgent message from Mrs. Blackwood. Mr. Kazemi collapsed in greenhouse. Ambulance called. Abandoning propriety, Thea rushed from the gala. At the hospital, she found Omar conscious but weakened. Pneumonia, the doctor explained. His lungs show scarring consistent with previous respiratory trauma. Later, sitting beside his hospital bed, Thea learned the truth about the journey that brought Omar to England, the boat crossing where he nearly drowned, the refugee camp where pneumonia first damaged his lungs, the years of precarious existence before finding employment at Windermere. I was somebody once, Omar whispered in the dimly lit room. Professor Omar Kazim. I published papers, mentored students, traveled to conferences. You're still somebody, Thea replied, taking his hand. Omar's eyes met hers. The medal nomination, you must withdraw it. My presence here depends on discretion. Thea's silence was her answer. Blossoms of Courage. The International Botanical Conference in Edinburgh became the backdrop for their reckoning. Omar, fully recovered, attended as Thea's research assistant, visible but anonymous. The Linnaeus Medal announcement would close the conference, and tension between them had grown with each passing day. During a presentation on Middle Eastern drought-resistant species, the speaker, Professor Ibrahim from Jordan, displayed a photograph of researchers from a 2015 symposium. My esteemed colleague, Professor Kazemi from Aleppo University, pioneered this cultivation method before the war claimed his career. His whereabouts remain unknown. Omar, seated at the back of the hall, went completely still. Thea, beside him, felt rather than saw his distress. "We should leave," she whispered. "No." Omar's voice was barely audible. "I can't keep hiding." After the presentation, Professor Ibrahim was surrounded by colleagues. As the crowd thinned, Omar approached him. "Professor," he said softly, "it's been many years." The older man stared in disbelief. "Omar, Allah be praised. We thought you were dead." Their emotional reunion drew attention. Soon a small crowd gathered, former colleagues expressing amazement at finding the lost botanist of Aleppo alive. That evening, during the pre-award reception, Thea found herself confronted by Professor Donnelly and two committee members. "Your illustrator is a refugee using a false identity," Donnelly stated coldly. "The committee cannot possibly—" "His name is Professor Omar Kazemi," Thea interrupted. "Formerly of Aleppo University, author of 3 books, and survivor of circumstances none of us can imagine." Her voice carried, drawing attention. "His identity isn't false, it was stolen by war." The room fell silent. Omar appeared at Thea's side, his presence a quiet strength. "The Linnaeus Medal has always honored excellence," Thea continued. "If you can look at his work and deny its brilliance because of politics, then perhaps the medal has lost its meaning." Professor Ibrahim stepped forward. "I have copies of Omar's academic publications from before the war. His credentials are impeccable." "And his current legal status?" Donnelly pressed. "Is being regularized," came a new voice. Jonathan Harrison approached with a distinguished older gentleman. "May I introduce Sir William Blackwell, chairman of the Botanical Heritage Foundation and my employer. He's taken a personal interest in Professor Kazemi's case." Sir William nodded gravely. "The foundation has filed for academic asylum on the professor's behalf, with my personal endorsement. The Home Office has been most accommodating." The balance of power shifted palpably. When the medals were announced that evening, Omar and Thea stood together on the stage, their partnership acknowledged before the botanical world's elite. Harvest of Hope 2 years later. Windermere Botanical Sanctuary had transformed, now a research center specializing in endangered species preservation. It housed the newly established Displaced Scholars Initiativa program, providing scientific refuge for academics from conflict zones. Omar, now co-director with Thea, oversaw the botanical illustration program that had become internationally renowned. His legal status secured, he had reclaimed his academic identity and published extensively under his own name. Their relationship had evolved too, from colleagues to partners in every sense. Their wedding, a small ceremony in the Mediterranean garden beneath the ancient olive tree, united not just to people but to worlds. On a warm autumn afternoon, Thea found Omar in their shared office, reviewing applications for the new term's scholarship positions. "The Syrian botanist looks promising," she observed, reading over his shoulder. "As does the marine biologist from Venezuela," Omar replied. "We'll need to expand the aquatic research facility if we accept her proposal." Thea sat on the edge of the desk. "The foundation has approved our budget increase. We can accommodate both." Omar looked up at her with a smile that still made her heart skip. "When I was drawing in that notebook the night you found me, I never imagined this." "Which part? The International Research Center or marrying the reclusive botanist who caught you?" "Both," he laughed, "though I did hope for the latter fairly early on." Thea raised an eyebrow. "Really, even when I was being impossible about the Rothmuller specimens, especially then?" Omar took her hand. "Your passion for plants was the first thing I loved about you. Your passion for justice was the second." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Blackwood, now the center's administrative director, entered with a young woman. "Professors, this is Dr. Farida Nasser from Damascus University. She's arrived early for her interview." The young botanist's eyes widened in recognition. "Professor Kazemi, your papers on xerophytic adaptations inspired my doctoral research." Omar welcomed her warmly while Thea watched with quiet pride. From her window, she could see the expanded greenhouses where researchers from a dozen countries worked side by side, their knowledge preserved and nurtured like the rare plants they studied. The broken greenhouse pane that had first brought Omar into her life had led to this not just personal happiness, but a sanctuary in the truest sense, a place where knowledge transcended borders, where expertise was honored regardless of circumstance, where seeds of opportunity could take root and flourish. As the afternoon sun filtered through the glass roof, casting rainbows across the polished floor, Thea reflected that the rarest, the most precious thing she had helped preserve wasn't a plant at all but the human capacity for growth, resilience, and renewal against all odds. "Shall we show Dr. Nasser the desert species collection?" Omar suggested, drawing Thea back to the present. "Yes," Thea agreed, taking his outstretched hand. "After all, every new beginning starts with a simple introduction." Together they stepped forward to welcome another traveler into the garden they had built between worlds.